Oh, yeah. We're back. This is Joseph F. Price. Joey P is in the house. And I'm not by myself today. I got a very spectacular guest, and we're actually going to talk about his story, his life, and his journey, his recovery, and how he is contributing to the world. I've got Mr. Randy Brown with me today. And Mr. Randy Brown's story really speaks into what I've always been saying. And I deliberately didn't prep Mr. Brown, and I don't know that much about Mr. Brown. I did that on purpose today. But his story really speaks to the things that I've said for all these times, that porn makes people do things and porn makes people become things. And in his situation, he'll tell you about what it made him become. And just like it makes you become something, not doing porn is about becoming somebody, a different person, a person who doesn't do porn, a person who has grown up and grown out of porn. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, if you would be so honorable to give this man a silent applaud. Mr. Randy Brown, good afternoon, sir, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Joey. This is we're off to a fast start. This has been awesome, very eventful so far. I love it. You create a warm environment here for this podcast, and I'm thrilled to be here and excited to share a story, and just hope that there's a few seeds that land on fertile soil out there. There always are. We just never know who it's going to be, and looking forward to our conversation.
I appreciate it. You know, I haven't done a podcast in like 4 or 5 months, actually 4 months. I was fortunate this year to actually take a 6-week away from home vacation. Imagine that in this day and time. And when I say vacation, that means that I only spent like a half hour on the computer every day. I took a vacation and I took a nap every day. So it's a privilege to be back. I will tell you that it's almost like getting back off of the saddle, which is my question. It was a little bit difficult getting this back together and doing the sound checks and getting everything right and the light and check. And then, I mean, I started like an hour ago. It took me almost 40 minutes to get it to where I wanted to get it to. And it's really should be like 10 minute process. So my question of the day, and people have different versions of it, but what is your answer to the guy that asks the question, what is a relapse? There's no right answer, but what is your answer?
Well, it's fundamentally just a return to previous behaviors that weren't very becoming of ourselves. For whatever reason, we got involved in porn in the first place. Whatever it is that's going on in our life, is the second time around to return to it. But it's and that's biblical. A dog returns to his vomit, and I have thought about that a long time, because, boy, when we become involved in certain behaviors, there's always, I think, a little bit of a gene in us that, so to speak, that may allow us to return. But I think it's as simple as that. It's that behavior that we're repeating that we wish we wouldn't, but we do sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you consider a relapse where somebody goes to a behavior one time, or would you consider a relapse something when someone really kind of turns their back on growth?
Yeah, I think it's just one time. And the reason I take that stand because for me, one would mean there's going to be a two. If I don't give it the weight that it needs, because I would really need to pay attention to a one circumstance, because boy, it's easy to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in a hurry.
Mm-hmm.
So I would really want to give that credence and
Okay.
take it pretty seriously. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of people have a lot of different answers, and I actually would take your answer. I think for psychological reasons, I like to use the term slip because of the fact that people, they make relapse their enemy when in fact relapse can be their friend. Because at the end of the day your life turns around is a couple minutes after your last relapse, and people haven't realized that. And so that's my feelings about relapse. That there's a difference between a relapse and a slip. I feel that a relapse is when you deliberately turn your back and you're done, and you want to fail. That's the standard. But again, I'm not going to battle. I use the term relapse all the time. So it's different strokes for different folks. But I think what you said is really the place that a recovered person should come from, which is, hey, there's no space for relapse. That doesn't even exist.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I love your comment about that. And I would just add that I think it's really healthy if we do it in a very if we do it in a with integrity. We don't, well, our mind is so clever that part of my treatment was to go through and to break down all the parts of how I had deceived myself, self-sabotage, if you would. And I found out all kinds of things about myself that I did to make what I was doing okay, and it wasn't okay. Isn't that
People
crazy?
don't always like the language here, but
yeah, yeah. But I think it could be really healthy to take words or to take meanings of phrases and put our own spin on it, as long as it's a healthy spin. And the reason I bring that up is because I don't believe that the medical community has yet become real serious about sex addiction as a disease, if you would. And it got pretty easy for me to use that word addiction. And then I had a good conversation with somebody, and I began to take the stance that for me, it wasn't an addiction. For me, it was a series of behaviors that I okayed. I checked the box. I said it's okay, and went ahead and executed that behavior. I know myself well enough, Joey, to know that I can take the fact that it's an addiction and start to make sense and start to give myself a little pat on the back and a little credit for why I did the things that I did with pornography. And I don't need that. I need pornography not to be an addiction. If others want to, that's fine. That's totally up to anybody else. But I have, like with alcohol, I hear that a lot about, well, I'm predisposed to alcohol and I can't help it. I have to drink. And I just don't believe that fundamentally. I don't believe that we have to drink, and I don't believe that if we're so-called addicted to pornography, then we might feel like it's not okay, but it's the addiction made me do it, and I really couldn't do anything about it. And I don't want to live in that world because I know myself well enough. So that's just sort of sort of self-defining terms. I think that can be healthy if they're done in the right way for the right purpose.
And one of the things that I noticed in your answer and what you just finished saying is one of the things I always stress to people is language. Because in both of those circumstances, when you said somebody said that they're predisposed, that's your language. You think that you're predisposed and you keep reinforcing that lie. And as long as you reinforce a lie, then it becomes a truth. And you don't get an email that, hey, that lie I was telling for all those years, now it's a truth. So if you would, because it's kind of the same for our generation, because it's nice to talk to somebody in the same generation. But tell me about your early exposures to porn and how that became something exciting to you. And if you can, why, if you know why you were attracted to it.
I do remember the very first time, and it was on the playground in about third or fourth grade, maybe. And I remember one of the kids came out, and there was next thing you know, there's a big circle of boys around looking at something they were interested in. Well, it was a lighter, it was a butane lighter. And when you turned it upside down, the model, that was wearing a bikini on the beach, she would lose her clothes and her
I remember that one.
drop.
Yeah.
Yes. And I can sit here 60 years later and tell you this story because I remember it like verbatim, like, it's just burned into you, that first image, and then with it comes all the curiosity and all the wondering why, and then all of the comparing of what you saw there to what's in the real world with real people. And then it all sort of began at that time. And I didn't know it. I was just a curious kid that wondered why she looked like that. And it was different than anything I'd seen. And wow, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So that's where it started. As innocent as that you must say, but I think then we all have that image, in our mind. For me, it was probably then with a group of friends when one of them had a Playboy that their father had or their grandfather had or somebody had at the house. I do sort of distinctly remember that and flipping, through that with a bunch of guys in maybe fifth or sixth grade. And so, that's sort of how it started. And as I tell as I go through my journey, I always make sure that I indicate that I sort of it was sort of important as I grew older, as I went to college, got out of college, got a job, was on my own before I got married. I had a magazine or two around. It was just sort of comfort to always be able to by myself at night, take a look at a magazine and fantasize and go through all those mental gymnastics, if you would, that one does when they fantasize. And so, and that continued, through my married life. I always sort of had something that was there, or I traveled a lot. So I, would typically travel with a Playboy or a Penthouse or something like that. So, yeah, it isn't, when my issue with pornography really, got legs, it wasn't because I just all of a sudden became aware of the naked body and the sensations that brings with it. No, there's, I think it's always really good for me to talk about how there was it was kind of there, and it was kind of part of my life, from a youngster, not knowing anything, growing all the way up, until it got out of hand, which we'll get to.
So what was it that, so here's the question. Here's the question I'm looking to ask. What was it you were trying to self-soothe when you were a teen?
I think that originally it was just, it was just the uniqueness of the female shape and the body and the breasts and just all the curves and everything. It was just so different than anything, that I had seen, and curious about it. I do know that around sixth grade, there was I had an opportunity to, let's say, have this girlfriend and to spend time with her, and I chose not to. And that was something that kind of came from my family. It came from my father, actually. That wasn't the right thing to do. And so I heeded his advice. But from that time on, Joey, I remember thinking, what am I missing? I've got to be missing out. And so the other guys would have girlfriends, and would always wonder, I wonder what they're doing with their girlfriend that I
Mm-hmm.
could be doing that I'm not, because I decided not to. And that led right up until, I mean, my high school years, my sophomore, junior, senior years. And it wasn't until a therapist many, many years later, in a conversation I was having, pulled that out of me, that actually happened. And he said, I got to tell you, you probably have no idea how profound that could have been on the way you thought about the opposite sex, of what happened. I just thought it was just a silly little thing that grade school kids, a girlfriend in sixth grade, like that's a forever deal, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
just kind of what you do. But I made a conscious decision that wasn't going to be for me. But um, I I'll tell you, this thing FOMO, the fear of missing out, is big for me. I have it, whether it was collecting baseball cards or whether it was trying to work and get in the NCAA tournament as a college basketball coach. I tell you what, I've had a heavy dose of FOMO, and that's probably just one example of it, actually. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably what it was.
Well, I think porn actually fuels FOMO in people. I think that's part of it. It's a machine that does different things, and one of them is the FOMO. And the FOMO was told to us 2,000 years plus years ago. Don't do it in the Ten Commandments when it says don't covet. And that's part of what porn does, is it really does get you into, hey, let's look at this, let you see this, so that you get confused and then start comparing stuff and this and that and the other. And that's part of the machine. And one of the things I also found was that it's kind of confusing for guys that grow up in good homes or Christian homes and such. But like pornography and sexual addiction and overeating and pride and arrogance are the Christian sins. They're not going to go out and steal and do a whole bunch of drugs and do a whole bunch of this and that. So this is one of the things that Christian people do anyway. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times when they don't realize that this happens, they get into a whole bunch of shame and don't work on it. When in fact, if they knew the structured environment, I guess your dad was strict, because porn addicts, it tends to be a strict environment or no boundaries at all, and opportunity.
Yeah.
And something that you had to escape to self-soothe. I don't know whether you had brothers that got more attention than you, or a divorce. Did you figure out what that thing was? You didn't. It just was the curiosity, huh?
Yeah, just the curiosity and the fact that like I said, I had this girlfriend and I decided not to, and that's always been with me. I think that was probably pretty profound, actually, and was shocked when this doctor brought it out as something that could have been pretty pivotal, and I had never given it any credence at all. So it could very well have been.
Yeah, a lot of times it does come down to an event, and unfortunately, the events that happen to us in our childhood, we process from a childhood brain, but yet they affect the adult brain.
Right.
And then if we don't revisit them with the adult brain, then they stay processed immaturely.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I figured that out on the fly. So there we go. So, all right. Now, I think you got into some kind of trouble with regard to porn. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. So let me, and I'll just, if you want to go back.
No. Actually, I think you have a setup for it. So go ahead and do the setup and then tell us about it the way you want.
Well, I'll tell you, adversity was something that creeped up on my wife and I and my family, in a very cruel way, but in a way that it does in life. And I became my father was a sports writer, and I loved basketball, and I learned it at an early age, and I even learned that you could be a coach at about age 8, and I wanted to be a coach. And I was lucky enough to become a high school basketball coach and teacher. But what I really wanted to do is become a college coach. That was my big goal, and I achieved that, and and had just an unbelievable 20-year career in Division One men's college basketball as both a head and assistant coach. And through that, we moved around a lot, and it was, and coaching at that level is pretty stressful. But we ran upon something head on in the fall of 1992 that we weren't ready for, and there was the death of our 4-year-old daughter, and it happened very quickly at home. I wasn't home at the time. My wife was at home and had to react and get her to the hospital, and it was a very rare disease that took her life in about an hour, and when it attacked her major organs, unbeknownst to us, just like another normal day. And we had a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old, and all of a sudden I returned home that night after coming back from the hospital, and we've just got one. And I can't tell you what that night was like. People that say it will change you in ways you can't imagine for the rest of your life, those people have lost a child. I'll promise you.
Yeah, and I know that not a day goes by without you.
No. So I'll tell you, life changed forever. But what I knew from being raised right, and my wife knew from being raised right, is you turn to your faith and you make the right decisions. A lot of poor decisions are made when we're in the most dire straits. It's easier to make a decision when things, are chaotic. And so we started to do that, but I'll tell you, it wasn't long until I added to the number of hours, working maybe an 80-hour week. I turned that into a 100-hour week, because I felt the more I could work, the more I could be absorbed into what I just absolutely loved for work, and that was being a college basketball coach and getting ready for the next game. Insane amounts of hours away from home. But I also drank excessively, and it just didn't serve me well at all. What I had begun was to create a secret life of soothing myself and taking care of myself, a very selfish, by the way, act, but I did. My wife, on the other hand, chose a very healthy way of going through the 6 steps of grief and doing it properly. And I just didn't join her on that. I had my own strategy. Living a second life it takes just so much energy. It's mind-boggling. And when, unfortunately, 2.5 years later, we almost lost our second oldest daughter, but she survived with the same disease. And 3 years after that, I hate to say that we lost our dear Natalie, who was also almost 4 years old, like her older sister, and we lost her very quickly. And when we lost our second child, Joey, I lost track of the world. I lost track of really what reality was, and so black and so dark that I had no feelings really for anything, and I was disconnected from everything. At that time, I made a decision that alcohol and working extra hours weren't enough. And so I began to view pornography on the internet. And when I did, and when I made that decision, I was making that decision for a 6.5-year run at alcohol and pornography, and pornography was very prominent. I did as a way to soothe what I was going through. And again, it was very self-serving. There were other ways, there were other decisions I could have made. I did. I was into it. I was so shameful of being that into pornography that I wasn't going to tell anybody. When it became mine and only mine and my maker, I always add that to it. Then I was going to hang on until either I died or something happened to where it was exposed. My use of pornography was exposed. And the latter happened. It happened 6.5 years later in 2003. And because of images that I had received and sent over interstate lines, my case became federal. My case was federal because, and I'm just telling the story now, I'm not blaming anybody. I have no ill will towards anybody in this chat room. Is and we know about how the level of arousal in pornography can wear off, and then it's about the next thing that we're going to go pursue that's going to create that same high, release the same endorphins and the dopamine that's going to give us the high and the thrill and the arousal. And to me, I had lost the arousal of it all until I started to venture into chat rooms. And to me, that was my drug of choice at the time. And for me to be able to type on the keyboard anything that I had ever thought or wanted to say or fantasize in my mind doing, I now had that opportunity. There was one fateful night when I was in a very explicit sexual conversation as purporting to be a 20-year-old male, 22-year-old male with an underage female of high school age. And it was a very explicit conversation. And one of the people who was in that chat room that night turned me in. That after the chat was over. And it was because of that I became a known entity, and that the authorities began to follow me. For 6.5 years, like I said, I lived a secret life of pornography where I was really the only one other than my mate. I'm still not sure how I survived at as high a level as I did with my coaching, but I did. We were on the net close to having a chance to win the national championship, all while this was going on. And eventually I had 2 agents walk in my office, and when they indicated a certain chat room name to me, and did I know of that name, and was I privy to this fact and that fact, I knew it was time for me to make a decision. I was absolutely exhausted. I knew what I was doing was wrong. I knew by exchanging images, it was going to create an issue. I didn't know what issue, but I knew it wasn't going to be good. And at that point, I made a decision to end pornography because I didn't want to continue as a second person. I just wanted to be a person. There was quite a cost to it, but I knew it. I really knew it, and I was ready to do it, and I did. It was very forthright with the authorities, and then and then the process began. So here's a guy that was doing what he always wanted to do, was supporting his family near where we were both from, making a ridiculous amount of money. And today that ridiculous amount is close to being in the millions for high assistance at the NCAA level on an annual basis. A future career, maybe being a head coach, kind of on and on and on. And I threw all that away. I threw it all away because of the decisions that I made with accessing pornography. And the price, tremendous. I'm I'm just so glad that I'm in a place and that I've met a guy like you, that I can have a forum to be able to tell this story. And I've had a lot of people say, you are a complete idiot. I don't know why you would ever want to drag the most a shameful vile things that a could do in the world. And I said, I understand where you're coming from. And I could probably see if we switch spots how I might say that too. But I said, I know for a fact that by sharing my story over the airwaves to who knows who, there is somebody that is going to hear this story and say the exact same thing I'm going to say right now. Oh my gosh, that's me.
That's me. Yep.
Or, oh my gosh, that can be me. And that's why I share my story. And we're going to get to it here in a second, but there is a real blessing in this story. I think one of the blessings was that my secret life ended. It ended for me. It wasn't self-inflicted. I didn't make the decision. I had been the one that made the decision, but I didn't. It was made for me. Okay. I got caught. All right.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a silver lining in this thing that we're going to get to. That is so much. It's so much what my story is all about, and we'll get to it. But
Well, you know what
I
I'm
hope
going to
that
do?
answers your
You
question
did
in a very
answer my
long-winded
question.
way.
And with that, I'm actually going to break this interview into two parts. This is Joseph F. Price, and I'm with Mr. Randy Brown. We're going to do part two in the next podcast. So I hope you join us. Thank you for joining us today. How can we reach you, Randy?
I can be reached. I've got a very easy website to remember. It's RB, which is my initials, RB Speaks, because I am a speaker and I'm a coach for men and I'm an author, amongst other things. But those are the three things that I spend my time working at each day. And I will give my email address too, which will go directly to me, and I will answer every email, and I will reach out and I will help in absolutely any way that I can. And it's my initials, RB at rbspeaks.com.
And if you would repeat both of those pieces of information.
Yeah, you bet. Website is rbspeaks.com. And my email is rb at rbspeaks.com.
All right. So this is Joseph F. Price, and that was Mr. Randy Brown. And please come back for part two of our conversation. As always, drive with caution, drive with care, and walk with caution. And remember, this is a journey. It's a step-by-step process. So it's not going to be done in one big bang. It's a journey. Take each step, make each day a brick so that you build a building of freedom and hope, and so that you can go back into the barrel and pull another gentleman out of the barrel that you once were in. We'll see you next time. God bless each and every one of you. Later.